Doctor Who Story by Story. The Crimson Horror Review. Just the facts. The Crimson Horror was an episode of Series 7 of the televised fan-fiction New Doctor Who series aired in 2013. It starred Matt Smith in his third and final season as the 11th Doctor, together with Jenna Coleman as his new companion Clara Oswald. The episode was written by new series stalwart Mark Gatiss and featured the return of the so-called Paternoster Gang in Victorian London, the Silurian Madame Vastra, her human bride Jenny, and their butler, the none too bright but violence-obsessed Sontaran called Strax. Plot. The Crimson Horror sees the Paternoster Gang become involved in the case of Sweetville, a mysterious community in Yorkshire, after a man who had been looking for a missing relative turns up dead with the image of none other than the Doctor burned into his retina. Going undercover as a new recruit, Jenny rescues the Doctor and Clara from captivity and finds that Sweetville's founder, Mrs. Gillyflower, is secretly creating a deadly poison that she intends to use to destroy the world, aided by a mysterious partner known only as Mr. Sweet. Guest cast. The Crimson Horror features an impressive guest cast, not only with the return of Neve McIntosh, Katrin Stewart and Dan Starkey as Madame Vastra, Jenny and Strax, but with Diana Rigg, still iconic as Mrs. Emma Peel from the 60s adventure series The Avengers, cast as the villainous Mrs. Gillyflower, and her real-life daughter Rachel Sterling, as Ada, Mrs. Gillyflower's blind and abused daughter. Trivia. The episode is the first time that Rigg and Sterling have appeared on screen together, and was especially written for them by Mark Gatiss. The scene where Jenny strips down to a catsuit and engages in hand-to-hand combat with a number of male assailants, who come off second best, was a deliberate homage to Mrs. Peel, who frequently bested male opponents in physical combat in The Avengers. The Doctor makes an oblique reference to the Fifth Doctor's companion Tegan, played by Janet Fielding, referring to a gobby Australian. Admittedly, that doesn't narrow it down very much. He once spent ages trying to get to Heathrow Airport, before later telling Clara Braveheart, Clara, a phrase the Davison Doctor often used on said companion. The idea that a person retains the last image they saw on their retina after death, as happens in this episode, is not actually true but was very much a widespread popular belief in the Victorian era. The episode also features a rather innovative use of a flashback sequence explaining how the Doctor and Clara came to be enmeshed in the Sweetville case, engagingly displayed in the manner of an old film. Fan reaction. The Crimson Horror received a generally positive reception from Doctor Who fandom, although a sizable proportion of fans greatly dislike the recurring characters of the Paternoster Gang, particularly Vastra and Strax, believing them to have watered down and made parodies of two of Doctor Who's most iconic monster races in the Silurians and the Sontarans. What I think. It is no secret that I am not the biggest fan of the new series, and that I regard Series 7 in particular, together with the subsequent two seasons, as being pretty much the worst not just of the new series but of all time. Series 7 is filled with episodes that are terrible in every aspect, and ones that have a reasonable premise but a hideously poor execution. Hello Cold War. However, The Crimson Horror was one of the very few episodes of the series I enjoyed upon initial broadcast, and after seeing the episode again recently, out of context and away from the drag factor of the rest of this highly disappointing season, I can honestly say that I still enjoy it and in fact enjoy it even more on its own. The episode's delight in black comedy and gruesomeness for the sake of gruesomeness is decidedly off-kilter to the normal tone of the new series, and very much appreciated by yours truly. In particular, Ada squashing Mr. Sweet at the end, particularly given it immediately follows the Doctor following his usual pattern of saying he will probably just drop the creature off on some uninhabited planet or other, is absolutely fucking hilarious. Diana Rigg is also an absolute hoot as the truly awful Mrs. Gillyflower, who in stark contrast to many other antagonists of this series, is not only defeated solely by physical action rather than the power of love, as became depressingly common in this season of the program, but most assuredly does not see the error of her ways at the end. I would go so far as to say that The Crimson Horror is the best episode of the decidedly underwhelming Series 7 by several thousand country miles, and one of the very few worth re-watching. If only more of the season had been of this quality, not only would Series 7 have been considerably more enjoyable, but it would also not have the disappointing drag factor on the rest of the Matt Smith era, which is otherwise my favorite period of the new series to date. The Crimson Horror gets a strong B+ from me.